Okay, we're going to talk about solving proportions. A proportion is a statement or an equation that two ratios or fractions are equal. In a proportion, the cross products of the terms are equal. What that means is, I have an example of a proportion up here. 6/9 equals 8/12, two fractions that are equal to each other. And we can prove this is a proportion by multiplying by the diagonals, the cross products, as you can see in the definition above. So if I did 9 times 8, I would get 72. If I did the other cross product here, 6 times 12, I also get 72, proving that this is a proportion. And this is true of every single proportion. Their cross products will be equal to each other. So if I know that, that means I can solve proportions with variables. So I look at these examples on the board here. I got 7/12 equals P over 51. And what I can do is I can solve this proportion. I need to find a calculator. All right, so if I look at my first one, 7/12 equals P over 51. What I can do is I can multiply by the cross product. I can multiply the cross products. So what I can do is, what I mean by that is I can do 12 times P, that's one diagonal. And I'm just going to write that as 12P. And when I do it, I always start with the diagonal that has the variable. I think it makes things easier. So 12 times P is just 12P. Over here, I do 7 times 51. I do that on a calculator. That's 357. So then what I can do is I can just divide by 12 to solve. This is just a one-step equation here. All I've got is 12P equals 357. That's an easy equation to solve. I just divide by 12, and I get P equals 357 divided by 12. I got to find a calculator. So 357 divided by 12. I get 29.75, but we're going to give our answer as a fraction. So I turn that into a fraction. I get 119 over 4. So P equals 119.4. So really, it's just two steps to solve most of these. So let's look at our next one. My first cross product here is G times 8, but I'm going to write that as 8G. Always put the number before the variable. Then my other one is 5 times 25. That's just 125. So now you can see I just have AG equals 125, a pretty easy one-step equation. Just divide both sides by 8. I do that. I get 125 divided by 8. That is going to come out to 15.625. I'm going to turn that into a fraction. I believe it's just going to stay 125/8. Remember, you can leave it improper. So, all right, let's look at our next one. X plus 2 over 14 equals X over 10. So this one's a little different because it's not just a variable. There's actually two different variables in this one. Even the top one, I've got a variable being added to 2 as well. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm just going to multiply one of the diagonals. It doesn't matter which one. Well, let's start with this one. Let's do this diagonal right here. This is X plus 2 times 10. So when I write this out, though, I'm going to do 10, but I got to put that X plus 2 in parentheses because that 10 is going to be multiplied by the whole X plus 2, the whole thing. And that's going to equal my other cross product, 14 times X, is just 14X. So now the first thing I got to do is I got parentheses. So I got to get rid of those. So I'm going to distribute here. 10 times X is 10X. 10 times 2 is 20. So now I got 10X plus 20 equals 14X. So now I got variables on both sides of the equation. I got to cancel one out. I'll just cancel the one on the right out. I'll subtract 14X. So that gives me negative 4X plus 20 equals, it does equal something. 14X minus 14X is just 0. Everything canceled out, so it's just 0. Now I'm just going to solve this equation. Subtract 20 from both sides. So negative 4X equals negative 20. Divide by negative 4 for my final step, and I figure out X equals 5. X equals 5. All right. Let's look at our next one here. Y minus 15 over Y plus 4 equals 35 over 7. So I'm going to multiply the cross products here. I'm going to multiply the diagonals. So I'm going to have Y minus 15 times 7. I'm going to write that as 7 times Y minus 15 in parentheses. On the other side, I'm going to do 35 times y plus 4. Now, I'm going to distribute on both sides to get rid of the parentheses. So I get 7y minus 7 times 15 is 105. On the other side, 35 times y is 35y. 35 times 4 is 140. So now when I look at this, I can see that, what is going on? Why is that popping up there? I can see that 7y minus 105 equals 35y plus 140. I've got variables on both sides of my equation, so I got to cancel one out. So I'm going to subtract 35y. I do that, I get negative 28y minus 105. And on the other side, those cancel out, so I just have 140. Now I just two-step equation, add 105. So negative 28y equals 245. Divide by negative 28. And y will equal, I'm going to guess that's going to simplify down. So 245 divided by negative 28 is negative 8.75. I'll turn that into a fraction. It's negative 35 fourths. So y equals negative 35 fourths is our answer. All right. Let's look at this one. 3 over w plus 6 equals 5 over w minus 4. So I want you to pause the video and I want you to try to solve this yourself and then check and compare to me and unpause it when you're ready. Okay, so 3 over w plus 6 equals 5 over w minus 4. So I'll do this diagonal first, 3 times w minus 4. And then I'll do this diagonal, which was w plus 6 times 5, but I'll put the 5 first. 5 times w plus 6. So both sides have parentheses, so I have to do the distributive property on both sides. So that'll be 3w minus 12. And on this side, it'll be 5w plus 30. All right, parentheses gone. My next issue is I've got variables on both sides, so I've got to cancel one out. I always cancel the one on the right out, so minus 5w. Those cancel. 3w minus 5w is negative 2w. Still minus 12, and it will equal positive 30. So now it's a two-step equation. Add 12 to both sides. My board went away. It will be back. Add 12 to both sides, so negative 2w equals 42. Final step, divide by negative 2, and w equals negative 21. All right. Keep it moving here. Let's do some word problems. So Greg took a total of 12 pages of notes during 6 hours of class. In all, how many hours will Greg have to spend in class before he will have a total of 18 pages of notes in his notebook? Now, I bet a lot of you can read this and just tell me the answer right away. But let's talk about how we would figure it out mathematically. What if it wasn't simple numbers like this? So the first thing we're going to do is we need to set up a proportion, which makes sense since we're learning about proportions. But when we do that, we need to be consistent. What I mean by that is whatever I decide is going to be on top of the proportion, because I have two different things. We're talking about pages of notes and we're talking about hours of class. So if I say pages are going to be on the top of my proportion, that means notes will be on the bottom. And I have to be consistent for my two fractions that I create. So my first fraction, I was told, Greg took a total of 12 pages of notes during 6 hours of class. So wait. I'm going to go back. I made a mistake as I was talking there. I said pages were on top, pages of notes. And that meant hours needed to be on the bottom, hours of class. I'm sorry, I totally messed that up. So if I say pages of notes are going to be on top, hours in class need to be on the bottom. I have to be consistent with that. So if there's 12 pages of notes, I messed up. Having technical problems here. What is going on? Hold on. Just like real class when I have technical problems. Okay, let's see if I can write down. So I said pages of notes are on the bottom, pages of notes are on the top, hours of class are on the bottom. So if I say 12 pages in 6 hours, that'll be my first fraction. I'll look at my second one, and it said, how many hours will Greg have to spend in class before we have a total of 18 pages of notes? So I know 18 pages, and I said pages were on top. So that 18 is going to be on top. And then if it makes sense that I don't know how many hours I'll call that X, because that's what I was asked to find. How many hours will Greg have to spend in class? So that's what I'm going to find. So now you can see I just have a proportion I need to solve. I cross multiply. So I'll do this diagonal first. 12x equals 18 times 6 is 108. Just divide by 12 now. And I get x equals 9. Now remember, this was a word problem. So my final answer is not 9. My final answer is, what was I finding? I was finding hours. So my final answer will be 9 hours. All right, let's do another. Suppose it takes 48 chicken fingers to feed Mr. Young's 4th grade class of 20 students. How many chicken fingers would be needed for 30 students? So this is another where I'm going to set up my proportion. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide what's going to be on top and the bottom. So this one, we have chicken fingers and we have students. So I'll say chicken fingers on top, students on the bottom. And you just need to be consistent there. So it says 48 chicken fingers feed 20 students. And then the question is, how many chicken fingers would be needed for 30 students? So that 30 is going on the bottom because I said students were on the bottom. So and then this will be my X as I figure out how many chicken fingers are needed for 30 students. So now I'm going to solve this, cross multiply. It'll be 20x equals 48 times 30. I believe that's 1440. I'm going to check myself with a calculator. It is 1440. And now you see one-step equation, divide by 20. And was that going to be 72? Yes, 72. So our question was, how many chicken fingers would be needed? It will be 72 chicken fingers. All right. I believe this is our last one. I want you to pause the video, try this on your own, and then unpause it and see if you agree with what I got. So David read 40 pages of a book in 50 minutes. How many pages should he be able to read in 80 minutes? So we've got pages and minutes. I'm going to say pages on top, minutes on the bottom of my proportion. So he read 40 pages in 50 minutes. And then the question is, how many pages should he be able to read in 80 minutes? So minutes, we said, were on the bottom. So that means pages, how many pages he reads in 80 minutes is what I'm trying to figure out. So I'm going to solve this. I get 50x equals 40 times 80 is 3,200, right? Yeah. So then I'm just going to divide by 50. And I get 64. And our question was, how many pages should he be able to read? He can read 64 pages in 80 minutes. All right, that is it for this lesson.